It took that long, a needle in a haystack, to find an amazing man. 1,000-fold, 10,000-fold of John Gentry. We need this man. We need to take what he's taking and educate all of our people.
Welcome to the Mill Creek View Tennessee podcast with your host, Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of the Mill Creek View newspaper.
Welcome back to the Mill Creek View Tennessee podcast. We are focusing on the volunteer state and our nation today with always an interesting person making a positive change in our community. This time, special guest John Gentry. Gentry served in the U.S. Marine Corps Force Recon from 1981 to 1990. He earned a bachelor's degree in accounting from the University of Maryland in 1997. Gentry's career experience includes working as a certified public accountant. Now, in the much more rough and tumble world of Tennessee politics, John is conservative-minded, campaigning as an independent due to rampant corruption in both parties. He works to restore the voice and power of the people in government by restoring the right of remonstrance. He's going to explain that. Hello, John. How are you today?
I'm good, sir. How are you today?
Doing great. It is probably the most beautiful day I've seen in Tennessee yet today, so it's a thrill, and thanks for coming on and getting indoors with me for a few minutes. I appreciate it. So you say you are not affiliated with either corrupt party. What did you see in your governor's race and Senate race that you'd call corrupt?
Well, not so much in the race, but what we see in our courts. There's no accountability of judges. They routinely violate the rights of litigants in there with case steering tactics, ignoring evidence, dog whistle cues between attorneys and judges. And in our legislative houses, we have incredible corruption. And, I think it was 2008, the FBI had the Tennessee Waltz investigation, numerous senators, representatives, local officials going to jail. This is a real problem that we have in Tennessee. Most of the legislation that we see is for corrupt purpose. Somebody's benefiting and they're getting more power, they're getting more money as a result of this legislation. And so, this is perpetuated by both parties. When you look at the corrupt legislation that's passing, it doesn't pass on party lines. It passes almost unanimously by 98, 99 representatives in the Tennessee House. And so, it's both parties that are perpetuating this corrupt legislation. There's no accountability, literally zip accountability of high-ranking state officials. And I'm the only person that's standing up and providing solutions in my work to restore the right of remonstrance. It's in Article 1, Section 23 of our Tennessee Constitution, and it is literally the solution and the only solution to corruption in government.
Do you think a system like that, like an election system like that, can even be fixed, where they would be the chickens that run the hen house, so to speak, or the foxes in the hen house, so to speak?
It's actually quite simple to fix, and I wouldn't be doing this work if I didn't believe that we could fix this problem. And what it takes is what we're doing right here, educating the public and teaching them about our state constitution, helping them understand that judges holding prohibited offices in agencies like the Code Commission and the Board of Judicial Conduct are repugnant to our Tennessee Constitution in violation of Article 1, Section 30, and in violation of Article 6, Section 7. But the people don't know about these violations because they're not taught our Tennessee Constitution. I mean, literally, Steve, it is not taught at grade school, high school, college. It is not even taught in law school. Attorneys, judges are ignorant of the provisions of our state constitution. And, when we look at our federal constitution and our state constitution, it should be obvious that anybody that understands these documents, it was protection, against what they call tyranny and oppression, which is the same thing as corruption today in today's words. So that's what those documents were put in place from. And because the people, have become so ignorant, our knowledge oppressed intentionally by government, they're able to get away with these things. So getting back to the question, is it fixable? We have to educate the public. and cause outrage in them. The people are in this coma of apathy. If it's not affecting me, I don't care. They're in this coma of distraction, sports, sex on TV, and all of the nasty stuff that captures our attention, and the ignorance. It's this coma of apathy, distraction, and ignorance. And so, our work is to wake the people up. If they're oppressing the rights of one of us, they're oppressing the rights of all of us. And we have got to work continuously to educate the people about what's in the Constitution and why it's important and why they need to stand up for it. And when that happens, today already, I have tens of thousands of Tennesseans that follow my work, and a large share of them actually understand the work that I'm doing. So I'm probably at about 10% of what I need to actually affect the change that we need. So if I keep building this base of people, helping them to understand the Constitution, causing them to be outraged at what's happening in government, we can fix this peacefully and lawfully by asserting the right of remonstrance and holding these guys accountable in there. It's really just a matter of the people standing up and being heard. And I'm not talking about street protests. I abhor street protests. I despise them. In my opinion, it's like a child throwing a temper tantrum. It is literally not how the framers intended us to protest government. It's done through this right of remonstrance and right of address. And we've got to start standing up for that and expressing outrage to legislators like corrupt Speaker Sexton, that how dare you oppress this right of the people, and calling out our representatives and senators, why are you allowing Sexton to oppress this right? And when that starts happening, these guys are going to get back in line, I guarantee it. But there's no outrage, there's no concern of citizenry, for the most part. But I believe in my heart we're going to get there. What you're doing here and the work that I'm doing, it's the same work. It's teaching the people, talking.
Yeah, I was going to say your episode 127 of Very Quiet Conversations, trying to exactly that, educate and get the word out that there's something wrong and that it can be fixed. And like you said, I also don't want violence, don't want street protests, don't want bullhorns down in the gallery. I want it to be done from an educated standpoint so we can actually be heard and respected. So how does Tennessee do it better or worse? We had the heritage.org survey that many politicians are very proud of that ranked Tennessee first in voter integrity, but even they gave it a B+. So we're the best of not a very good system, I guess, in America's 50 states. How does Tennessee do it better or worse?
I'd say economically, we're doing fantastic in this state, and we're government is managing, not bad. We're running out of surplus. It's largely because we've had so many new people come into the state, so we've had windfall sales tax revenue to the government. But even before that happened, I think they were not completely fiscally irresponsible, although there's a lot of fraud, waste, and abuse in government spending. But comparatively, to other states, I think Tennessee is doing really well with that. And comparatively, when you look at things like election integrity, we're not doing bad compared to the other states. But that's like comparing bad to worse. When we look at election integrity, what there should be is hand marked ballots that are transparent, that these documents are scanned, that they have a code number attached to each ballot that is cast, and they're machine counted with OCR recognition. And at the same time that they're counted, they're scanned. I mean, we have this technology to fast scan documents and load them up to the internet, and people can go look at their control number and say, yeah, my vote's there. And people can go look and count up the votes for each candidate and say, yeah, that's what was reported.
And it's a
without
lot
that.
cheaper. It's a lot cheaper than the system that they seem hell bent on implementing with the machines.
Well, I can tell you. I mean, let's look at my gubernatorial race compared to my senatorial race. In the Senate race in 2020, I picked up, I think it was about 26,000 votes. I had 28% of the vote, and that's in primarily Sumner County, but it's a portion of Davidson County and Westmoreland. Now, in my race for governor, I picked up 1% of the vote and came out with 15,000 votes. I had more votes in the Senate race than I did nationwide. I had hundreds of thousands of people, that were coming through and engaging, 99% positive engagement on my social media. And, it doesn't seem right, to have such a disparity like that. And so that's where we need, not just election integrity, but we need election transparency, where people can go in and look at the control number and count up the votes themselves. And I want this, machine counted, but if there's within a certain margin, that it's hand counted and hand counted at the precinct level. And I think if we do these things, revalidate, all of the voters that are on there, ID required at the ballot. We're doing that already, but we provide this transparency to it. I really think that we can get almost 100% secure election integrity here in Tennessee. So those are some of the things that we're doing good at, but it's comparing bad to worse.
Right.
Really.
You ran for on term limits for all state senators, representatives, and judges. What benefit to the state would term limits have on those three offices?
Well, what we have in our legislature right now are a bunch of self-interested legislators, and they legislate to their own benefit, and they legislate to the special interests that they represent. They do not represent the voters that elect them. They represent special interests. Almost, there's a couple good ones. Bud Halsey, Clay Doggett, there's a couple good ones in there that really are representing the people. But most of them are not representing the people in government at all. And for the few good ones that we do get in there, talking about how are we going to benefit for term limits, they typically have, like me, I have some things I'm passionate about that I want to accomplish when I'm in office. But what you have with most people is after they've been in a while, they lose that passion. They got done what they wanted to get done. And so now they're starting to be influenced by special interests. This goes back to, I think, Plato. Each individual ruling at a time, and then the citizens ruling at a later time. What I'm saying, each ruling in their turn. We've got to have turnover, in our legislative houses, so that they don't buy into that special interest influence that they have in there. And I mean, looking at like Speaker Sexton oppressing the right of petition, that's because of entrenched politicians in there. I know the rest of them, they wouldn't care if a citizen got in there and orally addressed the body, which is a constitutional right we have. You, Steve, and you have a constitutional right to orally address the legislative houses. And you didn't know that until you started learning about the work that I'm doing. And I think most of the legislators in there, they're okay with it. They wouldn't mind if a citizen has a proper purpose or grievance addressing the body for redress or for seeking favor, like election integrity or something like that. So with these term limits, we can get rid of the entrenched career politicians.
And a guy like Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally's been there since 1974.
Thank you. And when when we talk about like judges not having term limits, here's the problem. If you look at the ballots across the state, most judges run unopposed, and here's why. To run to be a judge, you have to be an attorney, and so if you're an attorney running against a judge, you got to say one of two things. He's not doing a good job, or I'm going to do a better job. And how do you think that judge is going to react when that attorney goes back into that courtroom? Oh, you just said you can do a better job, or I'm not doing a good job. He's not going to do very well in his cases going forward. Right. He's going to have a judge biased against them. So what happens is nobody runs against these guys. They just run. They just get, once they get in there, they're in there forever. When you see, judges or attorneys running against other attorneys for office, it's almost always when a judge has retired or died. And so what you end up with is, and this is why we have an incredible problem with corruption in our judiciary, is because they run unopposed. So I want term limits, and I guaranteed term limits if I were elected as governor. I think I can come pretty close to guaranteeing term limits if I'm elected as a representative, because I'm going to reach out to the people as Representative John Gentry saying, if you will sign this petition with me, if I can get all of you to sign this thing with me, I guarantee we're going to have term limits. And
I want to get into the weeds a little more on judges in a second, but I wanted to ask you this one, since this is your wheelhouse. Your platform was restoring constitutionally protected rights, especially the right of petition for redress of grievances. What other rights are you thinking of that need restoring besides petition? And can we not petition for grievances now? Isn't that standard government 101? We cannot. Tell us about not being able to petition for grievances.
So Article 1, Section 23 of the Constitution, citizens have a right to apply to those invested with the powers of government for redress of grievance or other proper purpose by address or remonstrance. So I'm the first person, I mean, literally, I am the first person since the year 1850 to exercise that right to the legislative houses, 170 years. So let's start with that fact alone. The fact that I am the first person to exercise that right is proof that the right is oppressed. Would you disagree with that statement?
No, if 1 in a million, 1 in 4 million.
I mean, if, since the year 1850, and there have been hundreds of thousands of aggrieved citizens that didn't know how to exercise that right, or didn't know that they could exercise that right. It's because the right is oppressed. Now, when we look at it further, have you seen the announcement of my remonstrance on the floor of the House?
Restoring the right of remonstrance, January 18th, 2019. You became the first person since 1850 to have a remonstrance received and recorded in the journals of both houses of the Tennessee General Assembly. Your remonstrance literally shook the foundation of corruption nationwide and resulted in several corrupt judges being removed from office. What did you mean by then, and when was it taken away?
Have you seen the video of that announcement?
No, I didn't know there was a video out there.
Yeah, am I able to share a screen on here?
No one's ever done that before, but we could try it.
All right. Yeah, I've got share screen. It's disabled right now. If you can enable that. But if we can get this going, I'm going to show you. And this is proof to the people, watching this podcast that we have a constitutional right to do that.
Article 123, restoring justice to our courts by restoring accountability to our corrupt judiciary. That was your fourth pillar of your campaign.
Yeah, I think there's down at the bottom of your screen, if you mouse over the bottom of your screen, a menu should pop up, and I think you can enable share screen on there. There you go. All right, so this is on the floor of the Tennessee House.
Next order, Mr. Clerk. Petitions and memorials. Mr. Clerk. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Rule 15, we have a brief statement regarding a petition of remonstrance statement filed by Representative Halsey. It reads, I'm approaching the Tennessee House Chief Clerk on behalf of Mr. John Gentry with this petition and statement. Involves a petition of grievances. 1, unconstitutional and void statutes. 2, failure to address grievances. 3, judicial reform. 4, reinstitution of constitutionally guaranteed rights. Signed, Bud Halsey, Tennessee State Representative.
So that video, were you able to see that and hear that okay?
Yeah, it's great. Thank you.
Okay, so that was my first exercise of that right. I've done it twice now. And as a result of that 39 seconds in closed door proceedings, they removed about 12 or 14 judges from the Tennessee Board of Judicial Conduct. Like about 14 corrupt judges removed from office.
Wow.
I mean, that is the power of the right of remonstrance. It is the solution to corruption. Now, how that's being oppressed, I also filed proposed articles of impeachment for 3 trial court judges and the entire Tennessee Court of Appeals. And they wouldn't even look at the evidence. They wouldn't even consider it. And I gave them 700 pages of appendix proof that these judges and appellate judges are corrupt. But they won't even look at the evidence. So they're oppressing this right. You know, historically, I've gone down to the Tennessee Archives Library and I've gone through the House journals. And historically, you can see in the journals, you know, Mr. McGaughy presented a petition on behalf of Baptist McCombs. Resolved, the petition was referred to the Propositions and Grievances Committee. And you know, there's example after example in the early 1800 journals from our Tennessee House representatives that these petitions were presented on the floor, and then they were referred to committee for discussion and deliberation. And then the committee would make a recommendation back to the body. And they would say, you know, the Committee on Propositions and Grievances has recommended that the petition be denied or granted, you know, and they would vote, and then the body would vote. Now imagine we get 6.8 million Tennesseans to sign a remonstrance that we present to the General Assembly saying, we're not asking, we're asserting constitutional rights that we want term limits. And that is referred to the body, and we provide them with statutory language to enact immediately, as well as language to amend to the Tennessee Constitution so that we can enshrine term limits within our state constitution. And that, you know, that's a 4-year process for the constitutional amendment, but we give them, so then they take that and they go back to a special committee or you know, maybe to judiciary committee or something, and they go and talk about it and say, here's the language. And then that committee makes a recommendation to vote or to grant or deny this. Now, here's what I'm talking about, understanding the Constitution and how we as a people have a constitutional right to do this. And if I may, can I share the Tennessee Constitution with you?
Sure.
And show you exactly what I'm talking about here?
All you Rumble viewers are going to get a treat here.
All right, so here's our Tennessee Constitution. And in Article 1, Section 1, can you see this okay?
Yes.
Okay, Article 1, Section 1. All power is inherent in the people. All free government is founded on authority instituted for peace, safety, and happiness. For the advancement of those ends, they have at all times an unalienable, indefeasible right to alter, reform, or abolish government in such manner as they may think proper. Now, alter our form of government, that's what term limits are. That's altering our form of government. Reform is like we have judges holding prohibited offices in violation of the Constitution. We need to reform that. What they meant by abolish, you know, that's not take, all that means is to take that Constitution and tear it up and start over. Because when you abolish government, what you do is you tear up the paper and say, because this paper, this Constitution creates government. It establishes right here in the preamble, right above. We, the delegates and representatives of the people of Tennessee, duly elected in convention assembled, have ordained and established the following constitution and form of government for this state, which we recommend to the people for their ratification. This constitution created our form of government, and it's ratified by the people. And the people can start over and tear this thing up. I don't recommend that, but I recommend some amendments like term limits and some other things. Now let's go on.
We certainly wouldn't want to tear it up because, if I'm not mistaken, Thomas Jefferson himself said this was the best constitution of all the ones that existed, and it wasn't even a state yet.
Well, exactly. You're exactly right. Thomas Jefferson said it's the least imperfect and the most Republican. And it's our Tennessee Constitution. That's why I say Tennessee is going to be ground zero for reform of our government, because our rights, our power are best protected in layman's terms that everybody can understand. You know, this Constitution, this is very plain language compared to the ones that were written by lawyers in the New England states. You know, our Constitution is very easy to understand.
So let me ask you a couple more questions. I don't want to run out of time with you because it's fascinating. Okay. And we'll get back to all your points, I'm sure. But we do have 5 justices of the Supreme Court that are seated in Knoxville, not Nashville, the capital. I find that interesting. Sharon Lee, Jeff Bivens, Holly Kirby, Roger Page is the Chief Justice. He replaced Bivens as chief from 2016. And I guess until recently. And Sarah Campbell was put there after Cornelia Clark died. All their terms are, they go until 2030. So I guess they do have term limits, but it's a long time. Are they corrupt? Are those 5 people corrupt?
Absolutely, and I can prove it. So I just had a case that I presented to the Tennessee Supreme Court, and I asked all 5 justices to recuse pursuant to Article 6, Section 11, which says no judge or justice shall preside over any case in which they have an interest without consent of all the parties. And if all of the justices have an interest, then they shall certify the same to the governor, who shall appoint a number of men of law knowledge. So I wanted all of the justices to recuse from the Tennessee Supreme Court, and I wanted the governor to give me a special Supreme Court. And so I filed a motion to disqualify them. Now, the process for that is in Tennessee Supreme Court Rule 10b. That's how you ask justices or judges to recuse. Now, under Rule 10b, Section 3.03, if the motion is denied, the judges shall state grounds as the basis for denial. So the legal definition of grounds, it's the legal argument or supporting authority as basis for their decision. So I said they're constitutionally incompetent because Justice Page and Justice Pivens are holding seats in the Tennessee Code Commission. And those seats are expressly prohibited in Article 6, Section 6. And in addition to being, or Article 6, Section 7, and in addition to that, the Code Commission has statutory power to prepare and present bills. That's a gross violation of Article 2, separation of powers, as well as they have statutory power to edit the actual acts of the General Assembly. So they can change one letter and say, oh, we were fixing a typo, but they can change the meaning of the law by changing one letter. And so I said, you're constitutionally incompetent because you've been conferred a hereditary emolument in violation of Article 1, Section 30, and you're holding prohibited offices. You're constitutionally incompetent. And if you're incompetent on these provisions, how can you be competent on the rights in Article 1, Section 23 and Article 11, Section 16 that are at the heart of this matter? How can you be incompetent on one part and incompetent on another? And so I ask you to recuse. And so their order, I have it sitting behind me, and I can show it to you on the court website. They just said, we have determined that you have not shown us to be constitutionally incompetent. That's it. One single sentence. No legal argument, no grounds. So the Tennessee Supreme Court violated their own rules. Tennessee Supreme Court Rule 10b. They violated their own rules and refused to disqualify. And they're in treason to the Constitution because the Constitution says no judge shall preside over any case in which they have an interest. And they have an interest to oppress the right of remonstrance because it is the solution to judicial corruption. And they didn't say we don't have an interest in that. So I will say it publicly. And I am asserting my right in Article 1, Section 19 of every citizen to have that the press is free to every citizen to examine the proceedings of any branch or any officer. And I will state publicly that the justices of the Tennessee Supreme Court are, in my strong opinion, corrupt. And the corruption that is going through our legislative houses and the corruption that is going through our courts is because our Tennessee Supreme Court is not doing their job. They're corrupt. They refuse to hear cases when they should, and they hear cases when they don't have jurisdiction over these cases. They are absolutely corrupt.
A few years ago, the 3 female justices and past justices like Judge Daughtry, the first woman on the Tennessee Supreme Court, were at Lipscomb University and said, as young women, most of the justices had never seen a female lawyer or judge and had trouble imagining a career in law, 1975. Do you think Tennessee makes it especially hard for women to be judges?
No, I think we have a lot of female judges around the state.
It's strange that they said that, isn't it?
You know, I don't think that it is difficult at all. I mean, you just got to run for office. I've had 3 cases in front of female judges. So, you know, I think they're quite, I've had more cases in front of female judges than male judges. So no, I think that's not to me. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that's why I pulled it out, because they said it publicly at Belmont or at Lipscomb, and I said to myself, that doesn't sound right. So I wanted to ask you, since you've been around a lot longer.
It sounds like divisive language of the left to me.
I also find it interesting in Tennessee, the court picks the attorney general, and the governor picks just about all other cabinet members like health and education, which for some reason he chooses from out of the state, whereas Scarmetti is from here, which is nice. What do you think of AG Scarmetti and the job he's doing?
Well, the entire office of Attorney General is also corrupt, and that is easily proven as well. In my first case against the speakers and clerks of both houses, Deputy Attorney General Kleinfelter tendered falsified evidence to the court. I have a certified copy where I was suing the speakers and clerks of both houses because I have a right to address them, and I asserted that right. And but I didn't, as evidence, I intentionally didn't do this. I didn't file a copy of my remonstrance when I filed my complaint in court. I just said I filed one. Well, Kleinfelter, this is Deputy Attorney General Kleinfelter. She is the second highest attorney in the state, right under the Attorney General. So she filed and said, attached as an exhibit is a full copy of Mr. Gentry's petition. Now that document, I have a court certified copy of it. She literally changed my language. In the jurisdictional statement, I said, this document is a formal written protest and public petition. She literally changed it and said, this is a complaint. I said, this is a constitutionally guaranteed right under the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Tennessee. And she said, this is a constitutionally guaranteed as of right. And as of right is a legal term, meaning it's discretionary. Rights are not discretionary. I mean, she literally changed the words of my document. I called them out in court, and I have transcripts to prove this, where I put that document up on the projector, put it side by side next to the true legal document that was filed with the General Assembly. And I'm saying she falsified this evidence. And then Kleinfelter said, well, it wasn't me, it was the defendants. The defendants are the speaker and clerks of both houses in this case. And the judge wouldn't do anything. I did a motion to sanction, I did a motion to discipline attorney misconduct, and the judge wouldn't do anything. I did the same thing in the Court of Appeals. And they all looked the other way and said, it's okay that a deputy attorney general tendered falsified evidence to a court of law or a court of equity in this case. And I took it to the Supreme Court and they ignored it too. They said, we don't care that we have either defendant clerks and speakers or we have a deputy attorney general that has falsified evidence. Nobody cares. And, this is the kind of stuff that is happening to litigants across this state every day. There's no accountability of state officials.
So
and
John,
if you put me in office,
you're a licensed CPA for more than 20 years and proficient in forensic accounting, which I know all about. I have a good friend who does that. And you said you'd use your extensive experience to root out fraud, waste, and abuse in our state budget. Where would you start?
In the judiciary. For example, starting actually prior back to 1950, courthouse security was not necessary. They didn't have courthouse security. And the reason for that is because our courts were mostly fair. You generally went in there and you got a fair shake. Now, as the courts became more and more corrupt, they started adding courthouse security. One thing they had in the last budget I looked at, they had $1 million to study how to improve courthouse security. I can tell you the best way to ensure courthouse security is to render fair decision, that you don't have to worry about vigilante justice. That if you have fair courts, then you're not going to have to worry about somebody that's so upset they're going to try to come in there and shoot the judge, which, by the way, it's not reported very much, but it's actually quite a big problem that we have, that there's nowhere to get justice because this right of remonstrance is oppressed, and because judges protect judges, and agencies like the Board of Judicial Misconduct dismiss 100% of complaints against judges, there's nowhere to go. So people take up arms. And, they have shootouts on courthouse steps, inside of courthouse buildings. And it's because the right of remonstrance is oppressed. I mean,
so you wanted to put a stop to corrupt pretended legislation. That's the key word, pretended legislation from being enacted into law. I've heard since I've been here, a lot of the left usually say Tennessee legislature doesn't pass laws, they pass lawsuits. Everything has to be litigated when they get it done. Politics has certainly become a game of lawfare everywhere. I think maybe because of the Rose Law Firm back in the Clinton days, this has all just been blown up and it's become like warfare, but lawfare over the last 40 years. What pretend legislation do you dislike the most?
Well, you actually hit on it. It's not. And say that again for me because I really liked it. It's
pretend legislation.
So you said it's lawsuit legislation.